was 1996 when the tragedy began. An entire cheerleading squad of 7 girls from a quiet suburb outside Albuquerque, New Mexico, vanished without a trace. They had just finished performing at a regional showcase, an event filled with energy, glitter, and applause, and by the end of that night, they were gone. Among them were 15-year-old identical twins, Olivia and Autumn Morgan, the pride of their parents, Caroline and Thomas Morgan. The girls had been glowing with pride after securing second place in their category. They had called their mother around 9 p.m., voices bubbling with excitement and promises to call again as soon as they were on the road back home. But that second call never came. As the hours ticked by and night faded into early morning, Caroline began to panic. Calls to the coach went unanswered. Parents began to call each other. The bus meant to return them never showed. By dawn, panic had consumed the entire neighborhood. Flyers were printed, search parties organized, and news outlets from across the state picked up the story of the vanished 7. Despite intensive searches, interrogations, and even national coverage, no trace of the girls was found. Their bags, cell phones, and uniforms were never recovered. There were no ransom calls, no evidence of a crash or accident, and no footage that clearly showed what had happened. The case quickly spiraled into one of the most disturbing, unsolved disappearances in the state's history. Caroline and Thomas, once an outgoing, optimistic couple, withdrew into themselves. They stopped going to community functions. They stopped celebrating birthdays. The last celebration in their house had been Olivia and Autumn's 15th birthday, just a few weeks before the competition. Since then, the house had remained in a strange stasis, as if frozen in time. Family portraits still adorned the walls. The girls' bedroom remained untouched, their trophies and pom-poms gathering dust, but never moved. Each year, Caroline lit candles for them on their birthdays and left the kitchen light on every night, just in case. Thomas spent his evenings sitting silently in the backyard, often staring into the dark. Though they had no proof of what had happened, the absence itself was a wound that refused to scab over. By the time 21 years had passed, most people had moved on. New families moved into the neighborhood. Younger generations grew up hearing the story as a local urban legend. But for Caroline and Thomas, every day was a quiet echo of what was lost. And then, on an unusually bright Wednesday morning, the silence was broken. Caroline sat in the breakfast nook of their now quiet home, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains. She absent-mindedly stirred her tea, the spoon clinking gently against the porcelain cup. At 62, her auburn hair had faded to streaked silver, and her face bore lines not just of age, but of pain and waiting. She wore Olivia's old denim jacket, as she often did when feeling particularly melancholy. Across from her, Thomas, now 64 and with more gray than brown in his beard, read the newspaper, though his eyes didn't seem to move across the page. The silence between them was habitual, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then her phone vibrated against the wooden table. Caroline blinked, expecting perhaps a message from her neighbor or a church group reminder. Instead, the screen displayed a name she hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades, Detective Ellis Rourke. "Tom," she whispered, her voice barely above her breath. "It's Detective Rourke." Thomas's hands went rigid around his coffee mug. Slowly, he set it down and looked at her, the color draining from his face. "Answer it," he said hoarsely. Caroline stared at the screen for a heartbeat longer, then swiped to accept the call. "Hello." Her voice cracked. "Mrs. Morgan," came the familiar voice, deep and deliberate. "I hope I'm not disturbing your morning." "Not at all," she replied quickly, placing the call on speaker so Thomas could hear. "Is everything okay?" "We have a significant update on your daughter's case," the detective said, his words slow and weighted. Caroline felt her throat tighten. "What kind of update?" she managed. Have you found something?" "I can't explain everything over the phone," Detective Rourke replied gently. "Could you and your husband come down to the station?" "As soon as possible." "We'll be there right away," Thomas said, already rising from his seat. "Thank you," Rourke said. "I'll be waiting." The call ended. For a moment, neither of them moved. The ticking of the kitchen clock seemed deafening in the silence. "Do you think Caroline couldn't finish the sentence?" Thomas reached across the table and took her hand. "Let's not assume anything," he said, though his eyes were misted with cautious hope. "But whatever it is, we face it together." They moved with a speed and urgency they hadn't known in years. Caroline grabbed her bag and a photo of the twins. Thomas collected his keys and wallet. Within minutes, their sedan was backing out of the driveway, the morning sun warming the dashboard as they headed into Albuquerque. On the way, Caroline stared out the window at the ever-evolving cityscape. New stores, new apartment complexes, unfamiliar traffic patterns. "They wouldn't even recognize this place now," she murmured. Thomas said nothing, gripping the wheel tightly. At the police station, the receptionist looked up in recognition and gave them a tight, sympathetic smile. "Detective Rourke is expecting you," she said, and directed them to a conference room down the hall. As they approached, Caroline noticed other familiar figures entering behind them. The parents of the other missing girls. 7 couples had once been bound together by horror, then slowly separated by silence and time. But now they were converging again, pulled by a thread of hope that hadn't completely snapped. As they all gathered around the table and Detective Rourke stepped forward, hair now peppered with gray, Caroline's heart pounded in her chest. Something had changed. Something had been found. And whatever it was going to shake everything loose again. Detective Ellis Rourke stood at the head of the conference room, his once dark hair now streaked with gray, his eyes shadowed with the weight of time and memory. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional shuffle of uneasy movement. Caroline and Thomas Morgan sat at one end of the long table, their fingers intertwined. Around them were the other parents, Deborah and Richard Lang, whose daughter Brooke had vanished with Olivia and Autumn, Melinda and Jorge Navarro, parents of Yasmin, Diane and Franklin Harper, who had lost their daughter Trinity, and Beatrice Shaw, the single mother of Ella. 7 families, 7 empty chairs at dinner tables for 21 years. Detective Rourke looked at them, his jaw tightening before he finally spoke. "Thank you all for coming so quickly," he began, his voice calm but resolute. "This morning around 6:30, a hiker named Brandon Dorsey and his dog were exploring a remote stretch of desert roughly 35 miles outside of Albuquerque. They were off-trail, in an area not typically frequented by hikers due to the lack of mapped paths and difficult terrain. The dog picked up a scent and began digging beneath a large, flat rock. Mr. Dorsey assisted and uncovered a metal suitcase. A murmur rippled through the room. Caroline's heart was beating in her ears. Rourke pressed a key on the laptop beside him. The projector screen behind him flickered to life, displaying a high-resolution photograph of a battered, rusted suitcase half buried in sand. The lid had been forced open, revealing what appeared to be folded red and white fabric. "These are cheerleading uniforms," he said, nodding toward the image. They matched the ones worn by the Thunderbird Stars during the 1996 regional showcase. Beatrice Shaw gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Deborah Lang leaned forward, her breath hitching audibly. Caroline felt her pulse spike as she squinted at the screen. Even faded and covered in dust, the fabric was unmistakable. The red and white color combination, the shimmer of the sequined Thunderbirds logo, They were the very uniforms Olivia and Autumn had worn the night they disappeared. How is this possible? Diane Harper asked, her voice trembling. Where exactly was this found? Southwest of Cibola National Forest, Rourke replied. Far beyond the original search radius. It's possible whoever buried the items assumed the area would never be explored. And until this morning, they were right. Has the site been secured? Thomas asked. We've dispatched a full forensic team, Rourke confirmed. They're cataloging everything. The suitcase has been transported to our lab for further analysis. The uniforms are aged, but preliminary inspection suggests they were buried recently, within the last year or so. Recently, Jorge Navarro echoed. But the girls have been missing for over 2 decades. Yes, Rourke said, his brow furrowing. Which is precisely what makes this development so unusual. The suitcase was buried shallowly, under just one flat stone. The soil shows minimal disruption, and the surrounding area had no other signs of tampering. It's almost as if someone buried it in haste or wanted it to be found. Caroline felt her stomach twist. We need to go there, she said suddenly, surprising even herself with the firmness of her voice. I need to see the site with my own eyes. Other parents nodded in agreement, their faces pale but determined. I'm sorry, Rourke said carefully. The area is an active crime scene. I can't authorize. Please, Melinda interrupted, her voice cracking. We've waited 21 years. We've waited through silence, false leads, and heartbreak. Let us stand where they might have stood. Let us see what's left of them. Rourke looked at their faces, worn, pleading, desperate, and sighed. I'll need to contact the field team, he said, stepping out into the hallway with his phone. The parents sat in heavy silence. Caroline stared at the image on the screen, barely blinking, her mind looping over the last moment she'd seen her daughters. How they'd hugged her tightly before boarding the bus. How Olivia had waved twice while Autumn had tugged at her braid nervously. They were so excited, so alive. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, Rourke returned. The team will allow supervised access, he announced. You'll follow a lead vehicle, stay behind the perimeter tape, and you will not touch anything. Understood? Yes, Thomas said quickly. Thank you. We leave in 20 minutes, Rourke continued. It's a long drive and the heat will be intense. Bring water, hats, and whatever you need for several hours in the sun. As the group exited the conference room, Caroline clutched Thomas's hand tightly. She could feel the tremble in his fingers matching her own. The parents filed into their respective vehicles, forming a somber caravan behind Rourke's unmarked police SUV. The city gave way to the suburbs, then to sparse settlements, and finally to vast, open desert. Cacti stood like sentinels along the roadside. The sun climbed higher, bleaching the sky and making the horizon shimmer. Inside their vehicle, Caroline stared ahead, her voice barely a whisper. Do you remember the last thing Olivia said to us? Thomas nodded. Don't worry. We'll be back before dinner. The ache in her chest deepened. They would be 36 now, she said. I wonder what they would have done with their lives, who they would have become. We might still find out, Thomas said, though his voice faltered. They could be alive. Caroline didn't answer. She wanted to believe. She had spent years clinging to belief. But this morning had shifted something. The suitcase, the uniforms, the fact they were only recently buried. It hinted at something buried deeper than cloth and zippers. It hinted at secrets, at someone watching all these years. Finally, the convoy reached a makeshift camp at the edge of a scorched plain. Several police vehicles and 2 forensic vans were stationed near a cluster of white tents. Officers moved about, dust rising in their wake. Yellow tape cordoned off a large section of dirt where the suitcase had been found. The parents exited their cars slowly, shielding their eyes against the blinding sunlight. Caroline immediately noticed a man standing beside a medium-sized golden retriever. The man waved hesitantly as Rourke approached him. "This is Brandon Dorsey," Rourke introduced. He and his dog, Max, found the suitcase. "Mr. Dorsey, these are the families of the missing girls." Brandon nodded respectfully, his face earnest beneath a layer of sunburn. "I'm real sorry you're all going through this." Max just wouldn't stop digging. "I knew it had to be something." "You found it," Caroline said, her voice barely audible. "Thank you." "It was just luck," Brandon murmured, eyes lowering. Rourke led the group to the edge of the taped perimeter. Under a white canopy, the battered suitcase rested on a table. Inside, the red and white uniforms were still folded, though visibly stained by time and dust. One bore the name Brooke faintly stitched inside the collar. Caroline swallowed hard as she spotted the initials AM on another. "That's Autumn's," she said shakily. A forensic tech nearby spoke up. "Based on fabric decay, we're estimating the burial occurred no earlier than 10 months ago. Someone put these here long after the girls disappeared." "Why now?" Richard Lang asked. "Why after all these years?" "That's what we intend to find out," Rourke replied. "But there's more. We found tire tracks. Recent ones. They lead deeper into the desert." Caroline felt the hair on her arms rise. She turned to look at the endless expanse beyond the tents. Something, or someone, had disturbed the silence after all these years. Detective Rourke's words hung heavy in the heat. "We found tire tracks. Recent ones." The sun beat down relentlessly, casting sharp shadows across the desert floor as the parents clustered under the canopy, their eyes shifting from the battered suitcase to the endless horizon. Caroline's heart pounded. She turned to face the expanse beyond the yellow tape where the tire tracks disappeared into the scrubland. Someone had been here recently. Someone had disturbed this site after all these years. Thomas took her hand. "What kind of vehicle?" he asked Rourke. The detective motioned to a nearby officer, who handed him a set of photographs. "We haven't identified the make yet," Rourke said, spreading the images out on a table. "But the tracks appear to be from a light utility truck, possibly a Jeep or mid-size SUV. The tread pattern is unique, deep and wide, suggesting off-road tires." Jorge Navarro leaned in, examining the photos. "Couldn't this be from your forensics team? Or maybe from hikers?" Rourke shook his head. "The tracks go beyond the site, into an area we hadn't searched. We checked the team's vehicle patterns. These don't match. And hikers don't typically go that far out. It's isolated, dangerous terrain." Caroline turned to Thomas. "If someone buried these uniforms less than a year ago, they might be watching. They might still be out there." A sudden rustling in the distance caused everyone to glance toward the edge of the taped area. 2 vehicles were approaching, a news van with a local affiliate logo on its side and a sleek gray sedan. Reporters. The storm was coming. Caroline recognized the woman stepping out of the sedan immediately. Lillian Burns, Olivia and Autumn's former cheerleading coach. Now, in her mid-60s, Lillian still carried herself with the precision and posture of a performer. Her silver blonde hair was tied into a tight bun, and despite the oppressive heat, she wore a pressed white blouse and dark slacks. "Coach Burns," Caroline called out, surprise coloring her voice. Lillian turned, her expression caught between recognition and restraint. "Mrs. Morgan," she said with a nod. "Mr. Morgan." She approached slowly. "I came as soon as I heard. A reporter called me." "You're still in town?" Thomas asked. "I thought you moved to Oregon after the school shut down." I did, she replied. But I visit often. My sister still lives here. Rourke stepped between them. Coach Burns, I'm Detective Ellis Rourke. You were the girls' coach the year they disappeared. Yes, she said firmly. I was with them at the regional showcase. I was the last adult to see them. Caroline's mind reeled. She remembered the chaos, the interviews, the frantic search that followed. Lillian had been questioned extensively at the time, but nothing had come of it. Do you recognize this? Rourke asked, pointing to the suitcase. Lillian moved toward the table. Her face tightened as she looked at the faded uniforms. Yes, she said. That's our team set from 1996. We ordered custom sequins that year. Only our squad had that color pattern. Do you know who had access to the uniforms after the showcase? Rourke pressed. Everyone left with theirs, Lillian said slowly. I don't remember any spares being unaccounted for. Some of the girls might have traded or kept each other's for memories, but they were all supposed to go home with them that night. Rourke made a note. You might be asked to give a formal statement back at the station later. Of course, Lillian said, glancing again at Caroline. I always hoped they'd be found. I never stopped thinking about them. Before Caroline could respond, a young woman with a camera crew approached. Detective Rourke, can we get a comment for the 6 o'clock? Rourke turned to the parents. Would any of you like to speak to the media? It's your choice. No pressure. The group exchanged hesitant glances. Beatrice Shaw stepped forward first. I'll say something, she said. People need to know they're still out there. Someone knows what happened. Caroline watched as the grieving mother stood in front of the camera, her voice strong despite the tremor in her hands. If anyone out there remembers anything at all, speak up, she said into the lens. We've waited over 2 decades. Don't let this go unsolved any longer. When it was Caroline and Thomas's turn, they stood side by side, hands joined tightly. Our daughters were 15, Caroline began. Full of life, full of plans. Someone took that from them. We believe this discovery is just the beginning. We want answers. If Olivia and Autumn can hear this, we never stop looking. We never will. After the interviews, the sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the desert. The heat remained thick and unrelenting. Caroline wiped her brow and turned to Thomas. I left my camera in the car. I want to photograph the site before the light fades. I'll come with you, Thomas said. They informed Rourke, who gave a short nod. Stick to the flag path. Don't wander beyond the marked zone. We don't need another mystery out here. As they walked back to the lot, the desert silence pressed in around them. The wind stirred fine sand into the air, carrying the scent of dry sage and distant memory. Caroline's eyes scanned the horizon. That was when she saw them. 3 men crouched near a truck parked behind a low rise. One of them was dragging a heavy sack. Another was by a rock formation, watching something intently. Tom, she whispered, clutching his arm. Do you see them? Thomas followed her gaze. Yes. What are they doing? That's not just camping gear, she said. They're hiding something. We should go back, he said. We should tell Rourke. By the time we do, they'll be gone, she countered, already moving toward them. Caroline. Thomas hissed, but followed. As they approached, the men suddenly noticed them. One shouted, pointing. The man with the sack heaved it into the truck bed. The other 2 rushed toward the cab. In seconds, the engine roared to life and the truck peeled away, kicking up dust in its wake. Get a picture. Caroline cried, fumbling for her phone. She snapped a blurry shot just as the vehicle disappeared beyond a ridge. The image was nearly useless. Sunlight, motion blur, dust. But something caught her eye. A decal on the rear window. A logo. It was a bird, she said. Wings spread. Letters underneath. CPF maybe. Thomas frowned. That sounds familiar. They reached the spot where the men had been. A shallow hole had been dug and then hastily covered. Thomas knelt and began brushing away dirt. Something small and metallic glinted in the sunlight. He lifted it. Caroline gasped. That's Olivia's, she whispered. Her earring. I gave them matching ones for their birthday. She never took it off. Thomas examined the tarnished silver star with the red gem. We need to show this to Rourke. They turned and began hurrying back toward the tents, clutching the earring as if it were made of glass. Whatever had started 21 years ago was not over. Someone was still hiding something, watching, moving. And now, Caroline was certain, they had just seen them. Detective Rourke was mid-conversation with a forensic technician when Caroline and Thomas arrived breathless, the earring clenched tightly in Caroline's trembling hand. Detective, she called out, her voice urgent. Rourke turned immediately, his expression shifting from focus to concern when he saw their faces. What is it? We found something, Thomas said, motioning for Caroline to open her hand. She did so slowly, revealing the small, tarnished star-shaped earring with a red gem in its center. This belonged to Olivia, she said softly. I bought identical pairs for the girl's 15th birthday. They wore them every day. This one was Olivia's. Rourke took the earring with gloved hands and examined it closely. Where did you find this? About half a mile from here, Thomas replied. We saw 3 men by a truck. One of them was dragging a sack toward the vehicle, and another was digging near some rocks. When they saw us, they fled. We found this earring in the spot where they'd been digging. Rourke's eyes narrowed. You saw 3 unidentified men and followed them. We didn't have time to go back for help, Caroline said, her voice cracking. They were moving fast. We had to see what they were doing. And then we found this. The detective frowned deeply. That was dangerous. This isn't just about old evidence anymore. Whoever buried that suitcase may still be active and capable of anything. The surrounding parents, who had gathered as Caroline and Thomas spoke, stood frozen in disbelief. Lillian Burns stepped forward, her mouth slightly open. 3 men? Near the site? Do you remember what they looked like? It all happened fast, Thomas said. They wore caps, sunglasses. One of them had a heavy limp. But there was a logo on the back window of the truck, a stylized bird, possibly a phoenix, with the letters CPF underneath. CPF, muttered Beatrice Shaw. Wait a second, that sounds like Caraway Performance and Fitness. Heads turned instantly toward Lillian, who looked startled. Vincent Caraway's company? Rourke asked, his voice suddenly sharp. Yes, Beatrice said. He used to sponsor the cheerleading team. Back in 1996. That's true, Lillian confirmed. Caraway sponsored the uniforms, paid for the travel costs. But he sold the company a long time ago, at least 20 years. Rourke's eyes locked onto hers. Do you know who he sold it to? A man named Matthew Renz, she replied. Caraway stayed on as a consultant for a while, but eventually stepped back completely, or so he claimed. Rourke made a note in his pad. We'll need all the details. And the contact information for Renz. Something about this isn't adding up. Detective, Caroline interjected. I tried to get a photo of the truck, but it was too far. It's blurry. You can't see the plate, but maybe the logo's shape is visible. She handed him her phone. He studied the image carefully. Not perfect, he said. But we might be able to enhance it back at the lab. Michael Harper, Trinity's father, who had remained mostly silent until now, stepped forward. I remember that logo, he said, pulling out a notebook he carried for sketches. He quickly drew a stylized bird with wide, sharp wings wrapped around bold letters. CPF. That's what you saw, right? Caroline nodded. Exactly. It's definitely the old CPF logo, Lillian confirmed. Vincent had it on all his gym signage and uniforms, even water bottles. I'll have my team search the business registry, Rourke said. If Caraway transferred ownership, we'll trace it. But if that logo's still in use, he might be more involved than he let on. He was here earlier, Thomas said suddenly. Remember? He showed up just after we arrived, said he'd heard from a reporter. And he spoke to all of us, Caroline added, including Brandon, the hiker. He said he dropped everything to come support his girls. He still calls them that. Where is he now? Rourke asked an officer nearby. Gone, the officer replied. He left an hour ago. Said he had an appointment. Gave a brief interview to Channel 7, then drove off. That's convenient, Rourke muttered. We need to locate him. Now, he turned to a junior officer. Put out a bolo on Caraway. Start with his last known address. Check all properties tied to CPF or RENs. I want a list of vehicles registered under both names. The officer nodded and moved quickly. Caroline turned to Thomas, her stomach twisting. What if it was him? What if he's been hiding them this entire time? We'll find out, Rourke said. And soon. He handed the earring off to a tech, who placed it into a sealed evidence bag. We'll test it for DNA, residue, anything we can find. Just then, Brandon Dorsey, the hiker, approached cautiously with Max at his side. Hey, sorry to interrupt. I heard what happened with the men you saw. That's scary. It is, Caroline replied. But you might have just helped crack this whole case. Brandon nodded, brushing dust from his jeans. If there's anything else I can do to help, just say the word. Actually, Rourke said, turning to him. Do you know the desert area well? Fairly well. I hike out here a few times a month. Would you recognize tire patterns or signs of activity, new disturbances? Brandon scratched his chin. Yeah, probably. Then we could use your eyes, Rourke said. But it'll be supervised. No wandering. You'll guide a team to the area where the Morgans saw those men. We need to search it thoroughly. Brandon agreed. Just point the way. Rourke called over a field team and gave instructions. As the team prepared to head out, Caroline and Thomas were ushered back toward base camp. I want you both to stay here, Rourke instructed. You've already risked enough. We'll do the rest. But they might still be out there, Caroline protested. Or watching us. All the more reason to let my team handle it, Rourke said firmly. If they're close, we'll find them. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the arid landscape, Caroline sat beside Thomas on a camp chair, holding the matching earring she had kept all these years. The identical piece to the one found in the sand. She thought of Olivia, her fiery spirit, her laughter, the way she used to braid her sister's hair. That image remained frozen in her mind. They're closer than ever, she whispered. I can feel it. Thomas nodded. And someone is panicking. That's why they're moving. Why they buried the uniforms now. Do you think he's watching us? Caroline asked. He might be, Thomas said quietly. But we're watching now too. Off in the distance, the search team's flashlights flickered as the desert began to darken. Brandon led the way, Max darting ahead, tail high. Something had shifted. The silence of 21 years had finally cracked. And what was buried, both in sand and in memory, was beginning to claw its way to the surface. As dusk blanketed the desert in long shadows and golden light turned to deepening amber, Caroline and Thomas remained at the edge of the base camp, eyes locked on the distant flashlights bobbing over the ridgeline. The search team had vanished over the crest nearly an hour ago, led by Brandon and his eager golden retriever Max. Every now and then, a voice crackled over a police radio, too garbled to make out, followed by static. Detective Rourke paced near the forensics tent, checking in with various officers, but always glancing toward the horizon. Caroline could see the tension in his posture, the tightness in his jaw. She knew he was feeling it too, the sense that the years of dormancy, in this case, were suddenly erupting into movement. And beneath it all was a quiet panic, an undercurrent of dread that maybe, just maybe, the evil responsible for their daughter's disappearance had never gone far. "We should eat something," Thomas said gently, breaking the long silence. Caroline shook her head, but didn't argue when he stood and walked toward the SUV to retrieve the small cooler they had packed. She barely noticed when he returned, handing her a bottle of water and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. She nibbled at it, but her appetite was gone. Her thoughts were still circling that earring, the match to the one she'd found so many years ago in Olivia's jewelry box. She didn't believe in coincidences, and she didn't believe those men were out here by accident. When the sun finally dipped beneath the jagged mountains to the west, and the first stars emerged overhead, Rourke approached them again. His face was drawn, serious. "We found the tire tracks," he said, without preamble. "They lead to a small outcropping about 5 miles southwest of the suitcase site. There's an old, abandoned shack near the base of the hill. We found the truck." Caroline sat bolt upright. The same one. Same color. Same model. Same decal. No plates. No people. Was the earring the only thing left behind? Thomas asked. Rourke shook his head. The truck was stripped. No tools, no bags, nothing but some discarded fast food wrappers and a torn piece of tarp in the back. "We're towing it now, processing it for fingerprints and fibers, but I don't expect much. Whoever they were, they cleaned it out before fleeing." "But it was their vehicle," Caroline said. "You're sure?" "Yes," Rourke nodded. "And if we can trace the logo or VIN, we'll narrow it down." At that moment, a radio chirped behind him. An officer stepped forward. "Detective, there's someone at the perimeter. Says he knows the couple who found the earring. Won't give a name." Rourke's brow furrowed. "Where is he now?" "By the east access trail. Wants to talk." "I'll go," Rourke said. "Stay here. If anything happens, I want you two out of the desert and back in town immediately." "Who do you think it is?" Caroline asked, standing. "Could be a witness," Rourke said. "Or could be bait. Either way, we take no chances." He disappeared with the officer into the darkness. Caroline turned back to Thomas. "We need to stay alert," she whispered. "Something's happening. It's too many moves, too fast. Someone's scared we're getting close." "Do you think they know who we are?" "I think they knew the second we showed up," she said. "And I think they've been watching from the start." A few minutes later, a new vehicle approached the base camp. An older pickup truck with a rusted bumper and a familiar figure behind the wheel. Caroline recognized him instantly. "That's Chris Delaney," she said. "The man who found the suitcase." He parked beside them and stepped out, Dusty the Australian Shepherd Lab mix leaping down from the passenger seat with a bark. "I heard what happened," Chris said, walking over. "News travels fast in these parts. Thought I'd check in. Make sure everyone's all right." "We're managing," Thomas said. "Barely." Chris nodded, glancing toward the tents. "Is it true? They found more evidence." Caroline hesitated, then nodded. "We think so. But the people who buried it, they might still be nearby." "I wouldn't be surprised," Chris said, his voice low. "There's been strange activity out here the past few months. Off-roaders going places nobody usually goes. Small fires at night, weird noises, tools disappearing from campsites. Something's off." Caroline leaned in. "Do you know any properties nearby? Anyone who might be using this land?" "There's only one ranch within 15 miles, Chris said. Laughing Ridge. Owned by a guy named Gerald Laffinger. Rich private. Keeps to himself. Lots of security. Doesn't exactly mingle with the locals." The name made Caroline freeze. Laffinger? That's the same last name as the man who used to host the cheerleading fundraisers. He owned a cattle company or something. Donated big money to the school. Same guy, Chris confirmed. Still owns a huge spread out here. Some people say he's retired. Others think he's running something else entirely. Caroline's pulse quickened. Do you think he's connected? Hard to say, Chris said, frowning. But if you're following weird patterns, that ranch is a good place to look. Dusty barked once, then twice. The dog trotted toward the far end of the camp, nose twitching. Chris glanced after him. He's onto something. You mind if I take a look? Go ahead, Caroline said, and followed him a few paces before stopping. Chris bent down near the outer ring of the base camp and examined the dirt. There were boot prints here earlier, he said. Fresh. Not from any of the officers. And look, Dusty found a thread. Fabric. Could be from a jacket. Do you think someone's been circling the camp? Wouldn't surprise me. Caroline's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. If you want answers, don't trust the coach. Her blood ran cold. She turned the screen toward Thomas. Who sent this? Blocked number, he said, checking the message details. But they know we're here. We need to tell Rourke, Caroline said. But before they could move, they saw movement from the ridge. A motorbike was pulling away from the area, its tail light a red blur against the encroaching darkness. Someone had been close. Someone had watched. Caroline stared after the rider, her hands shaking. That wasn't a threat, she said. That was a warning. Caroline stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the disappearing taillight as the motorcycle sped away across the open desert, kicking up a plume of dust that shimmered red under the dying light. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than the echo of the engine retreating into silence. They were watching us, she said, barely above a whisper. Whoever it was, they were right here. Thomas moved beside her, placing a hand on her back. We need to get back to the camp, now. Rourke has to see that message. They turned quickly and rushed toward the cluster of tents, Chris and Dusty following close behind. Caroline's phone screen was still glowing in her palm, the message taunting her in sharp black letters. If you want answers, don't trust the coach. By the time they reached the central tent, Rourke had returned, his expression tense, flanked by 2 officers. He spotted them approaching and met them halfway. What happened? He asked sharply, noting the urgency in their faces. We just got a warning, Caroline said, holding out the phone. Someone's watching us. They sent this message. Rourke read the text carefully, his eyes narrowing. Where were you when you received this? Near the edge of the camp. Chris had just arrived. His dog found fresh boot prints and fabric near the boundary, Thomas explained. Then a motorcycle pulled away from a ridge. Someone was there, listening. Rourke turned to one of the officers. Secure the perimeter. Double the patrol. I want motion sensors activated on all approach paths and infrared deployed at the outer tents. The officer nodded and jogged off. Rourke handed the phone to a technician. Trace it. I don't care how many proxies they used. Find me a lead. Caroline stepped closer. Detective, there's more. Chris told us there's a private ranch not far from here. Laughing Ridge. Owned by Gerald Laffinger. Rourke froze. Laffinger? The same man who used to donate to the school? Host community events. Yes, Caroline confirmed. And he was connected to the cheer team. He was a major donor. What if he's involved in this? What if that ranch is where they've been? Rourke looked thoughtful. I remember the name from the old files. But he was never a suspect. Too public. Too well connected. Exactly, Thomas said. And what if that's why no one ever looked closely? Get me everything we have on Laffinger, Rourke said to his assistant. Properties, financials, associates. I want satellite imagery of that ranch. and find out who's been visiting him. Within minutes, the team was mobilized. Computers flickered to life in the mobile command center. Officers fielded calls, and data began to stream in. Rourke stayed close, issuing commands with military precision. Meanwhile, Caroline sat with Chris, who pored over hand-drawn maps of the surrounding terrain. "The ranch has only one main road in and out," he said, pointing. "But there's a back trail, rarely used, that connects to this arroyo here. I hiked it once. Almost broke my ankle. It leads right behind the property. Could someone bring people in through there without being seen?" Caroline asked. "Absolutely," Chris said. "Especially if they knew the land well." At that moment, the techs inside the command center called out, "Detective, we've got something." Rourke hurried inside, with Caroline and Thomas close behind. The lead tech brought up a blurred still frame on the monitor. "We enhanced the logo from Mrs. Morgan's photo. It matches an older design used by Caraway Performance and Fitness, circa 1996. And here's the twist. CPF was officially dissolved in 2007. But the branding has shown up sporadically since then on trucks and gear linked to remote construction sites, all of them funded by shell corporations." "Shells under whose name?" Rourke asked. "One of them leads back to Laffinger Holdings, LLC." Silence fell over the tent. Caroline's stomach flipped. "So he never let go of CPF," she said. "He just moved it underground." Rourke nodded slowly. "It's looking that way. And if that truck you saw was part of it, he may be actively maintaining something out there." "Like a holding site," Thomas said grimly. "Or worse." "We're going to need a warrant," Rourke said. "But that could take time. And if they think we're closing in, they might move whatever or whoever is still there." He turned to one of his senior officers. "Assemble a quiet team. No uniforms. I want aerial drones over that property within the hour. Start heat scans and monitor movement. If they run, we follow." Caroline's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same anonymous number. "They're moving them. You have 1 day. After that, no one will find them." She showed it to Rourke. His face hardened. "They know we're close. They're getting desperate." Just then, the command center's wide screen displayed a satellite image of the ranch. Several large buildings, including what appeared to be a barn and storage structures, stood within a high-security fence. In the rear was a path leading into a natural canyon. "That's the arroyo," Chris said. "If they're hiding people, it would be there." "We need eyes on the ground," Rourke said. "Tonight." Quietly, Caroline turned to him, her voice steady. "We'll go." Rourke blinked. "Absolutely not. You need someone they're not expecting. Someone who's already been seen near the site. They might not run if they think it's just us again. Besides, we have the waitress." "Waitress?" Rourke asked. "From the diner," Thomas explained. "She's seen the earring. She recognized the man who gave it to her, a friend of someone living at that ranch. She delivers food there daily." Rourke looked at them for a long moment, then made a decision. "Bring her in. And bring Delaney. If we do this, it has to be tonight." Outside, the wind was picking up, blowing sand across the hardpan. The desert whispered of secrets long buried, but now shifting, restless. Caroline looked once more toward the distant hills and whispered to herself, "We're coming for you, Olivia. We're coming." Under the heavy silence of nightfall, the plan began to take shape with dangerous precision. The waitress, whose name was Callie, arrived at the base camp escorted by an officer. She was in her mid-30s with freckled cheeks, a nervous posture, and a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. She held her delivery bag like a lifeline, fingers tightening around the strap as she approached the group clustered around the mobile command unit. "I don't want trouble," Callie said immediately, glancing around at the officers and the tension hanging thick in the air. I didn't know that earring meant anything when he gave it to me. Caroline stepped forward gently. We know. You didn't do anything wrong. But we believe the man who gave it to you is involved in something terrible. You could help us find our daughters. Callie swallowed hard and nodded. He's friends with Gerald Laffinger. Comes by the diner every couple of months. Quiet guy. Doesn't talk much, but he always tips well. I never thought twice about it until today. Rourke joined them, nodding at Callie. You still make deliveries to the Laffinger ranch? Every day, she said. Same order. 6 dinners, sometimes more. Today's going out in about 20 minutes. Do they expect you to arrive at a certain time? More or less. I go through the east gate. There's always a guard. He checks the bags, lets me in, then I leave the food on a table outside the main house. Rourke looked at Caroline and Thomas. You follow her. Stay a few minutes behind. If she gets stopped, don't intervene. Wait until she leaves the property. Then we make our move. You still want us to go? Caroline asked. Yes, Rourke said. But you don't go in. You watch. If anything happens to Callie, or if you see signs of movement, vehicles leaving, shadows in windows, you report immediately. No arruix. Caroline nodded. Understood. Rourke turned to Chris Delaney, who had joined them again with his dog Dusty. You know the terrain better than anyone. You'll lead our team along the arroyo. If there's a back route into the ranch, we'll use it. We move at 0300 hours. Quiet. No lights. Callie disappeared into the diner's back room where her insulated delivery bags were being packed by a staff member who knew nothing about the gravity of her route. When she emerged a few minutes later, she met Caroline's gaze briefly, an unspoken promise passing between them. Then she mounted her small delivery motorcycle and rode off into the dark. Caroline and Thomas followed a few minutes later in their car, headlights off until they cleared the first ridge, then trailing at a distance with the engine kept low. The dirt road leading to Laffinger Ranch was barely marked, just a splinter off the main track with a rusted sign reading private property, no trespassing. They parked on a rise overlooking the entrance, where Callie's bike was already pulling up to a tall iron gate. A security camera panned toward her. A moment later, the gate swung open. One guard emerged, flashlight in hand. He examined the bags briefly, nodded, and waved her through. Caroline watched through binoculars as Callie rolled up the long gravel driveway. From this vantage point, she could see the ranch's layout. A sprawling main house, a secondary structure resembling a guest cabin, several storage sheds, and a large barn beyond the yard. The place was immaculate. Well lit, but not glaring. Clean paths lined with decorative gravel and small flowering bushes. It looked peaceful, deceptively so. Callie stopped at the edge of the house, dismounted, and placed the bags on a table, just as she had described. She didn't linger. Within seconds, she was back on her bike, heading toward the gate. Caroline and Thomas ducked down as the bike passed below their lookout. A moment later, Callie's voice crackled over the radio Rourke had given them. Delivery complete. No one came out, but lights were on inside. At least 2 shadows moved behind the curtains. I'm headed back now. Copy that, Thomas replied. We're holding position. Minutes crawled by. Caroline kept her binoculars trained on the house. Nothing. No movement outside. No approaching vehicles. But something felt off. The calm was too deliberate. Suddenly, a new vehicle appeared. An old blue Jeep, dusty and dented, rolling out from behind one of the side buildings. It drove slowly, headlights off, following the perimeter of the ranch until it exited through a side road opposite the main entrance. Tom, Caroline whispered, pointing. That's the Jeep, the one from the desert. Thomas grabbed his phone and began snapping pictures. Inside the Jeep were 3 men, 2 in the front, 1 in the back. Even from a distance, Caroline recognized the way the one in the passenger seat slouched, his hat pulled low, the same as the man she'd seen loading the sack into the truck. "It's them," she said, her voice trembling. "They're leaving. They saw Callie. They know someone's coming." Thomas nodded grimly. "We need to follow." "No," Caroline said, gripping his arm. "We stay. That's what Rourke said. If we move too soon, we lose everything." They watched as the Jeep turned onto the highway, disappearing into the night. "Radio Rourke," Caroline said. Thomas grabbed the handset. "Detective, this is Thomas. The Jeep is on the move, heading north on Route 14. 3 men. No plates. Matches the vehicle from earlier. Copy." Static. Then Rourke's voice. "Copy. We see it on the drone. Stay put. Entry team is en route." Caroline exhaled shakily. "So what now?" "Now," Thomas said, "we wait. And pray we're not too late." Inside the main house of the ranch, behind those drawn curtains, something stirred. A flicker of movement. A light switching off. And somewhere, possibly beneath it all, someone might still be waiting, for rescue or for silence. The desert night was thick with tension, the kind that settles into the bones and refuses to let go. Caroline sat crouched behind the rocky ridge, her eyes locked on the ranch below, the house now dark except for one faint light in a back window. Thomas knelt beside her, camera poised, scanning the property through the zoom lens. Every few minutes, he clicked a silent photo, capturing angles, shadows, any trace of movement. Far below, the delivery bike was gone, the gate closed again. Callie had done her part. Now it was up to the rest of them. The radio crackled softly in Thomas's hand. Rourke's voice came through, hushed but firm. "Morgans, are you in position?" Thomas raised the receiver. "Still in position. Jeep's gone. No signs of activity at the gate. One light on in the back of the house." "Copy that," Rourke replied. "We're 5 minutes out. Delaney's team is approaching from the canyon ridge. Infrared drone confirms multiple heat signatures in the barn structure. Could be people. Could be livestock. We're moving in." Caroline's breath caught. "Heat signatures," she whispered. "They're in there." "Maybe," Thomas said. "Or maybe it's a trap." The minutes dragged by, each one suspended in anxious silence. Then a sudden flash of movement near the barn caught Caroline's eye. A figure stepped outside briefly, barely a silhouette in the moonlight, before retreating back into the shadows. "I saw someone," she hissed. "They're watching the perimeter. They know something's coming." On the radio, Rourke's voice returned. "Teams are in position. We're initiating breach protocol. Stay down, stay silent." The night cracked open with a single sharp sound, the muffled boom of a flashbang, followed by shouts in rapid succession. The calm was gone in an instant, replaced by chaos. Lights flared inside the house. Figures moved quickly behind curtains. From their perch, Caroline and Thomas watched the scene unfold with breathless intensity. Officers in tactical gear stormed the property, moving in coordinated formation. They breached the barn doors first. More shouting, then a loud metallic bang as something heavy hit the ground. Within moments, the main house was surrounded. Searchlights pierced the dark. The gate was thrown open as backup vehicles poured onto the grounds. Caroline gripped Thomas's hand. "Please let them be alive," she whispered. "Please." More shouting echoed from the barn. Then silence. For what felt like eternity, nothing happened. Caroline felt her pulse hammering in her ears. Then a voice, female, faint but real, screamed out from the barn. "Help. Please. We're here." Caroline gasped. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," Thomas whispered. "They're alive." The radio exploded with chatter. Subjects found in the lower barn structure. Multiple female victims located. Appears to be underground holding. Repeat, another officer said. We've got survivors. Caroline couldn't stop the tears that sprang to her eyes. Her body shook as she clung to Thomas. They're alive. Oh my God. They're alive. Just then, an officer's voice cut in. Be advised, suspects fleeing rear structure. 3 male individuals attempting escape through Western Field. Armed and dangerous. That's the Jeep crew, Thomas said. They're trying to run. Units intercepting now, Rourke replied over the radio. Do not engage unless fired upon. Caroline turned her binoculars toward the west end of the property. She spotted them, 3 figures darting through low brush, ducking behind rocks. They reached a waiting SUV hidden beneath a camouflage tarp. One of them started the engine while the others threw bags into the back. They're getting away, Caroline shouted. Someone stop them. Tires squealed. Spotlights followed. A police vehicle cut across the field, blocking their exit. Shots rang out, 2 quick bursts. The SUV swerved, slammed into a ditch, and stopped. Officers closed in. Caroline couldn't breathe. It's over, Thomas said quietly. They're not getting away this time. Down below, the barn doors were wide open now. Stretchers appeared. Medics rushed forward. From the darkness, figures emerged, frail, stumbling, held up by officers and EMTs. Caroline scanned each face desperately, heart in her throat. Then she saw her. A young woman with sunken cheeks, tangled dark hair, but eyes unmistakable. Eyes that mirrored her own. Olivia, she breathed. She stood, ignoring Thomas's warning, and ran down the hill. Olivia. The girl turned, eyes widening. She broke from the medics' hold and staggered forward. Mom. Caroline reached her, threw her arms around her daughter, and held her tight, sobbing into her shoulder. I found you, she cried. I found you. Olivia clung to her, just as fiercely. You came, she whispered. I didn't think anyone would ever come. Thomas caught up, embracing them both, his tears falling silently. Behind them, other families were reuniting. Kira Navarro was found alive, as was Hannah Harper. Each girl looked broken, thin, scared, but alive. Officers moved swiftly, securing the property, documenting every room. In the main house, they found evidence of years of captivity, diaries, restraints, a hidden surveillance system. The barn's underground chamber was a bunker, concrete walls, metal doors, a bathroom, beds. Proof of planning, of long-term imprisonment. Back at the barn entrance, Rourke approached, his face grim but resolved. We got them, he said. We have 3 suspects in custody, including Matthew Renz. Still no sign of Caraway. He's vanished. But we have the girls, Caroline said, still cradling Olivia. You did it. You found them. You helped, Rourke said. That earring, that message, it all mattered. Olivia pulled back slightly. Amber, she whispered. Where's Amber? Caroline's smile faltered. She's not. Olivia shook her head. No, she's not here. They killed her 3 years ago, when she tried to escape. Caroline's knees buckled. Thomas caught her as Olivia began to sob. They made us watch, she said. Said if anyone else tried to run, they'd do it again. Caroline could barely see through her tears. The joy of finding her daughter blurred by the pain of losing the other. We'll get justice, Rourke said. Every last one of them will pay. Thomas helped Caroline to her feet. Olivia leaned into them both. Behind them, the desert sky stretched endlessly overhead. But for the first time in 22 years, it didn't feel like an abyss. It felt like the beginning of something new. Inside the temporary field hospital, set up on the outer perimeter of the Laffinger Ranch, the reunited families sat in clusters, each surrounded by paramedics, trauma counselors, and detectives working tirelessly to document every thread of the harrowing nightmare that had just begun to unravel. The desert air was cooler now, but the heaviness hadn't lifted. It had only shifted into a different kind of storm. Caroline sat beside Olivia on a portable cot, her daughter wrapped in a gray fleece blanket, a 4-line in her arm and bruises visible along her collarbone. Despite the exhaustion etched into every inch of her face, Olivia's fingers remained laced tightly with Caroline's, as if letting go would risk the return of darkness. Thomas hovered nearby, speaking with a medic about Olivia's vitals. "She's severely dehydrated," the nurse said softly. "Malnourished. She's strong, but she needs real care long term." Caroline nodded, her eyes not leaving her daughter's. Olivia had barely spoken since their embrace at the barn entrance, but when she did, it was in soft, broken sentences. "There were 6 of us," she had whispered. "Only 3 made it to tonight." Now, she looked at her mother with red-rimmed eyes. "Kira and Hannah, they're here too, right?" Caroline squeezed her hand. "Yes, they're with their parents. Safe now." Olivia nodded faintly, her voice faltering. "Rachel didn't make it. Neither did Amber." Caroline swallowed hard, her throat tight with the grief she had no room to process yet. "I know," she said gently. "I know, baby. I'm so sorry." Olivia's gaze shifted to the open flap of the tent, where officers were leading the restrained suspects, Matthew Renz and 2 unidentified men, toward a waiting vehicle. Their heads were lowered, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. As they passed, Olivia flinched and turned away, hiding her face in Caroline's shoulder. "That's him," she whispered. "Matthew. He called us property. Said we belonged to Caraway. He'll never hurt anyone again," Caroline promised. "None of them will." Rourke entered the tent, his expression grim. He carried a folder in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. He nodded at Caroline, then turned to Olivia. "Miss Morgan," he said gently, "we'll wait until you're ready, but we need your help. Everything you remember, every name, every date, every threat, it's evidence. It could make sure these men never walk free." Olivia looked up at him slowly. "I want to help," she said, her voice raspy. "For Amber. For Rachel. They deserve justice." Rourke nodded solemnly. "Then let's get started." In a separate tent, Kira Navarro was giving her statement. Her parents, Melinda and Jorge, sat just outside, tears running down their cheeks as they listened to their daughter recount the years of captivity. "They moved us underground after the first year," Kira said. "There was a second bunker, smaller, hidden behind the barn. That's where they kept us after Amber and Lily tried to escape." "And who was in charge?" the detective asked. "Caraway," Kira said. "He was the one who gave orders. The others followed him. Matthew did the logistics, food, supplies, monitoring the security. But Caraway, he called it his sanctuary. He believed we were chosen." Back in Olivia's tent, Caroline sat beside her daughter while Rourke recorded the conversation. "It started after regionals," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "We had just finished second place. Everyone was excited. Coach Caraway pulled Rachel aside first, said he wanted to give her feedback. We didn't think anything of it. But when she didn't come out for 10 minutes, Autumn got nervous and went to check. She found Caraway with Rachel in the storage room. He was touching her." Olivia paused, her hands tightening in her lap. "We confronted him. He got angry, said we misunderstood, said Rachel was upset and he was comforting her. But then he left the room and came back with 3 men. They had syringes. After that, everything went dark." Caroline's knuckles turned white as she gripped the side of the cot. Rourke remained calm, patient, taking notes. "When we woke up," Olivia continued, "we were in the first bunker. Underground. No windows. just concrete. They told us we had been chosen to be part of something greater, that the world didn't deserve us, that we were going to be purified. And Caraway was the one who said that? Rourke asked. Yes. He made the rules. Controlled when we ate, when we spoke, when we slept. He had cameras everywhere. Sometimes he'd bring people to look at us, like we were animals. But no one ever stayed long. Most of the time, it was just him, Matthew, and Laffinger. Laffinger was involved, directly. He owned the property, funded everything. He told us to call him, sir. But he didn't touch us. Caraway wouldn't let him. Said we were his. Thomas looked away, his face twisted in rage. Caroline's heart ached as she watched her daughter recount unspeakable horrors with a steadiness that defied the trauma etched into her features. Do you know why they buried the uniforms? Rourke asked. Olivia nodded faintly. Caraway got paranoid. Said the world was changing, that the police were getting close. He made Matthew and the others gather anything that could connect us to the past. That suitcase, it wasn't buried until recently. He said it was a test. If it stayed hidden, we were safe. If someone found it, we'd move. And the earring? Amber's, Olivia whispered. Matthew took it after she died. Said it was pretty. Gave it to a waitress he liked. Said it would remind him of us. Caroline reached over, brushing Olivia's hair back gently. You were so brave, she said. We're so proud of you. Olivia looked up, her eyes shimmering. I kept hoping you'd find us, even after all these years. We never stopped looking, Caroline said. Not once. Outside, the sun began to rise, casting pale light over the desert. Officers moved between tents, gathering evidence, coordinating with incoming FBI units. The ranch had been sealed off completely, a crime scene now transformed into a sanctuary for the truth. Chris Delaney stood at the perimeter, watching quietly. Dusty sat at his feet, tail wagging softly. Callie, the waitress, had come too, lingering in the background, her eyes wide with a strange mix of relief and guilt. Rourke approached them. You both made this possible, he said. If either of you ever need anything, we just want them safe, Chris said. That's all that matters. And the others? Callie asked. The ones who didn't make it. Rourke nodded. We'll honor them. We'll bring them home. As Caroline helped Olivia into a transport van that would take them to the hospital for a full evaluation, she looked back one last time at the ranch, the place where her daughter had lost 22 years. And though justice was only beginning, she knew one thing for certain. This chapter was finally closing. And another, one of healing, of answers, was just beginning. The hospital corridors were quiet except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional distant beep from monitoring equipment, a contrast to the chaos of the ranch and the horror that had played out beneath the desert surface just hours earlier. Caroline sat beside Olivia's bed in a private recovery room, her hand gently resting on her daughter's. Olivia lay beneath clean white sheets, her skin pale but her breathing even. And though her eyes remained closed, she had slept soundly for the first time in over 2 decades. Doctors had confirmed what Caroline already knew, that Olivia was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and emotionally fragile. But she was alive. Against all odds, she was alive. Thomas stood by the window, staring out at the sunrise over Phoenix's city skyline. The sky was a mix of soft pink and golden hues, a surreal backdrop to the hospital's sterile interior. He didn't speak for a long time, simply watched the sky as if trying to anchor himself in something real. Caroline finally broke the silence. We have her back, she said softly. We lost Amber, but we got Olivia. Thomas turned slowly, his face lined with emotion. It doesn't feel real. I keep expecting to wake up and find out we're still searching. Caroline nodded. It'll take time. for all of us. A soft knock at the door preceded Detective Rourke's entrance. He looked exhausted. His shirt sleeves rolled up, dark circles under his eyes. But he held a manila folder in one hand and a guarded expression on his face. "Good morning," he said. "Mind if I come in?" "Of course," Caroline said, rising to greet him. Rourke pulled a chair up beside the bed and opened the folder. "We've confirmed identities on the men we arrested. The one who gave Callie the earring is Matthew Renz. The other two are former employees of CPF, security contractors. All three have been charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, and multiple counts of aggravated assault. The FBI's building a case for federal charges, too." "And laughing, Thomas asked. "He died overnight," Rourke said flatly. "Heart failure. We had him in holding monitored, but he collapsed just after midnight. Paramedics couldn't revive him." Caroline stared. "So he gets to escape everything?" "Not exactly," Rourke replied. "His estate is being seized. The FBI's linking it to money laundering, trafficking, and conspiracy. His legacy will be dismantled piece by piece." "And Caraway?" Thomas asked, his voice tight. "Huagasite." "Still no sign. We issued an all-points bulletin. Every airport, border, highway is on alert, but he planned for this. We found forged passports, cash, escape routes. He might be in another state by now, or another country." "You'll find him," Caroline said. "You have to." Rourke met her eyes. "We will." He stood and placed a small evidence bag on the bedside table. Inside was Olivia's earring, the one that had led them to the truth. "We had it cleaned. Figured it belonged here." Caroline picked it up with trembling fingers, her eyes misting. "Thank you." After Rourke left, the room returned to quiet. A nurse stepped in to check Olivia's vitals, offering a gentle smile before retreating. Caroline sat back down, studying her daughter's sleeping face. "She looks like Amber," Thomas whispered. "More than ever." "I know." Later that afternoon, Olivia woke. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the light, then focused on her parents. "You're still here," she murmured. Caroline leaned forward. "We're not going anywhere." Olivia's gaze drifted to the window, then to the earring on the table. "Amber wore hers the night we tried to run," she said. "She gave it to me before they caught us. Said to hold on to it, that it would remind me I was still hers, still yours." Caroline covered her mouth to hold back the sob that threatened to escape. "She was right," she said. "You always were." Olivia reached out and took the earring, clutching it in her hand. "They thought they erased us, but they didn't. We're still here. And you're going to be okay," Thomas said. "It's going to take time, but we'll walk every step with you." In the days that followed, the story exploded across national news. Missing cheerleaders found after 22 years dominated every headline. Interviews, press conferences, and investigations consumed Chandler and beyond. The ranch was declared a federal crime scene. Volunteers who had searched for the girls 2 decades earlier returned to offer help, support, and healing. Susan Collins, who had lost her daughter Rachel, spoke publicly at a vigil, her voice breaking but determined. "We lost our children to monsters, but we reclaimed their truth, and that matters." Kira and Hannah began their long road to recovery in trauma clinics, supported by their families and a growing network of survivors' advocates. Olivia remained in the hospital for 2 weeks before transitioning to outpatient care. Each day, she grew a little stronger, her voice a little firmer, her gaze a little less haunted. One morning, she joined her parents in the backyard of their Chandler home, sitting beneath the same olive tree where she and Amber used to play as children. The branches swayed in the wind, casting dappled shadows on the grass. "I remember this tree," Olivia said. Amber climbed it once and couldn't get down. Dad had to rescue her with a ladder. Thomas chuckled softly. She was fearless. She still is, Olivia said. In me. Caroline sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. You're home now, and we're going to make every day count. For you. For her. Olivia nodded. She looked down at the earring she now wore again, cleaned and gleaming in the sunlight. It sparkled like it had all those years ago. A reminder. A vow. Later that week, a memorial was held for the girls who had not survived. Amber, Rachel, and Lily were honored with candles, stories, and a stone monument engraved with their names. Olivia spoke for the first time publicly, her voice steady as she faced the crowd. We were taken, but we were never forgotten. And now we are not silent. This is our story, and no one will bury it again. The crowd stood in silence, tears streaming, candles flickering like stars in the desert wind. And somewhere far away, Vincent Carraway watched from a darkened motel room, the screen glowing with the news broadcast. He turned it off, lit a cigarette, and stared at the wall for a long time. But even he knew his time was running out. The world was watching now, and the truth could no longer be hidden. Back in Chandler, Caroline stood on her porch that evening, the stars bright overhead. Thomas brought her a cup of tea, and Olivia sat inside, reading, safe. Home. Caroline exhaled deeply, finally, a breath she hadn't known she was holding for 22 years. It wasn't the ending she dreamed of, but it was real. They had found the truth. They had found Olivia. And no matter what came next, they would face it together. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true mystery narratives. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe in the power of faith, type God bless them to send your prayers their way.